It's gone. We had a little bit of TV coverage. We'll see if we get our ugly faces on the cover of the Rolling Stone. Yes, Darren.
Do you need a permit in order to carry pepper spray or mace in Indiana?
No. There is a distinction. There's an oddball distinction. Actually, it'd been great when the chief was here to ask him. There is some. I'm not a taser person. I don't even like the way they look. I watched the video of him taking the cow down. It pisses the cow off a lot. I'd rather be shot than tased. But we have a difference in Indiana law about the megahertz of the taser and the age limit to hold a taser. But there's not a permit or otherwise for anything in Indiana other than a federal permit form for a suppressor or a machine gun or an NFA weapon or a license to carry a handgun. There was a follow-up, though, to the earlier question about stand your ground, and I'll say this much about it. In any case, whether you have stand your ground, don't have stand your ground, retreat, don't have your retreat, if you get two big public outcries on both sides, whether it's along race lines, gender lines, illegal aliens, legal aliens, those laws get put second place so that bigger social issue can get looked at. And that's what's going on in Trayvon Martin's case. It's a whole lot bigger than whether that was a lawful or unlawful use of force. Whether you have any of those doctrines we've just talked about, those are always going to get a media firestorm because people have been fighting along those lines since the beginning of recorded history and probably a long time before then.
I don't want to monopolize you guys' time with this, but with us out there, and if we've chosen to carry a weapon, at some point we could run into I'm leaving a restaurant. If I can get back into that restaurant, should I have to go there? Or can I stand there, say, go away, I just want to go home? I guess that was actually more of my question than what the Castle doctrine was. I think that at least we have a decent idea about what we are allowed to do and not allowed to do within our own homes, but it becomes a lot more gray if we are out to dinner or to the grocery store.
The question was basically taking the Castle doctrine such that it is beyond the home.
Exactly.
Outside at a restaurant.
Because it has been so much in the news and, these are horrible laws. Well, no, they're not. I thought they were well thought out. And I just was kind of looking from the legal aspect of Indiana, if it's something that you guys could speak to. That's really what I was kind of looking for.
State if it would help me anyway, state the precise question you have to stand your ground.
If I leave a restaurant and I'm with my wife and we are walking to the vehicle and we are accosted in some way, shape, or form, I should be able to act upon that threat.
I would say no in that example, and here's why. There's a proportionality provision that force has to be proportional to force, so unless they are threatening the two of you with serious bodily injury or death, or they're committing a forcible felony like stealing your car, I don't think that deadly force rises to that level. At some point in time it could, but again, to the extent you can disengage, you should, because it's not going to mitigate or eliminate the civil risk that you might have in doing that. And if you disagree, tell me.
I agree. In the self-defense law in the state of Indiana, you have no duty to retreat. And you can use, if they come at you with something less than deadly force, you can use less than deadly force to protect yourself or others. So you don't have to turn around and go back into the restaurant. Should you? Yeah. Probably that's the wiser course to prevent having to call Brian or Bob to defend you in a civil or criminal lawsuit.
Okay. Less than deadly force, would that be, could you shoot him in the leg or something like that? Because you didn't feel like that was going to be deadly, but it might stop him?
If you pull a handgun and you discharge it, that's deadly force in my book. You can figure out it. It's not going to differentiate.
Yeah, it's deadly force. Pepper spray, taser, that's along the lines of less than deadly force. Yeah.
Just a gentleman back in the blue shirt here.
Could you maybe address, like in a confrontation situation where you're threatened and maybe running is not a real good option, maybe you're a little boxed in, okay, you say, you know, I'm carrying a handgun, leave me alone, and the guy's like, well, you're BSing me. What are ramifications? Okay, one, maybe you lift your shirt up, you're showing you have the gun, or as opposed to maybe pulling the gun out but not pointing it at him, actually pointing it at him. At some point, if he decides to, you know, as far as the law, where do you start to maybe get into a problem where, you know, you could, you know, you threaten force, or I guess what can you do or get away, or I say get away with, but you know, I would hate to lift up my shirt and show somebody I'm having a gun, that I have a gun, and try to get them to leave me alone, and then have them go run into the cops and say, this guy threatened to shoot me. Does that make any sense?
I could walk out of here and call the cops right now and tell them that you threatened to shoot me. You can't stop people from lying if you've pissed them off enough, giving them reason to in their mind. So how far can you go? Part of that depends on how far you believe you need to go in a reasonable manner. That's the whole key, reasonable. I think, and that's what we talked about, there's litigation, and that's why people have to hire lawyers, because you get yourself in a spot where, well, how far was I able to go in this position? I can't think of the justice that wrote it. There's a famous United States Supreme Court justice that was trying to define pornography. And he said what? I know it when I see it. Okay, I can't define it, but I know it. And this is similar. I mean, what it really boils down to it is the variables are so different. Each situation and circumstance so unique that we'd love to be able to give you a bright line and say, well, you can lift your shirt. And there'll be others who'll say, no, don't let him know earlier. I don't want him to know I got a gun until the last possible moment that I have to use it. I don't want it to escalate any further. So it really is one of those where you got to think about it. As a colleague of mine says, you know, if 80% of the people would answer you did the right thing, then you're probably okay. And whether it's 75% or 51%, but that's the way it is. And we can talk till midnight about different scenarios. Was this person justified or not? The chief could have told us, you know, when they go through training, and some of you may have gone through some even law enforcement training where they are presented with those scenarios now on their videos and all their high-tech equipment, and they put them through all kinds of scenarios. Would you have drawn on this? Would you have fired and discharged in this instance? You can put in as many variables as you can think of, and what's the correct answer? Sometimes the unfortunate thing is you don't know until that jury comes back and reads a verdict.
Basically, as a proper person, you have less than the blink of an eye to make a decision that a group of people have that will have as much time as they want to determine if that decision you made in the blink of an eye was reasonable or not.
I'd say yes.
You know, I got a buddy of mine, he drives for UPS, and he was in South Bend in an alley, made his delivery, got in the truck, and he started going down a little alley, and this little black boy come out on his bicycle. He said he's only doing maybe 3-4 miles an hour when he hit him, and so UPS suspended him, was looking to terminate him, and so he was fighting for his job, got the union behind him and everything, and Mark said, he goes, the only thing I said that saved my job was, you guys have had umpteen hours to think about what I should have done at the time. He goes, I had 3 seconds.
I mean, are you, any of you familiar with the research of Gary Kleck? Does that mean anything?
No.
Gary Kleck, John Lott, Mustard, those folks. And this is not the legal aspect of it. He just, I think the number, don't take my word on it, was that approximately 2.2 or 2.7 million times a year people present a firearm in a potential situation and nothing happens. But then, of course, crime is only reported crime, so therefore there wasn't a report of the crime. So a lot of situations apparently have been defused by the presentation of a gun that never went to deadly force, that people decided discretion was the better part of valor and disengaged. the Allen County Sheriff's Department one time. I was at their Citizens Academy, and I asked him, how many officer-involved shootings do you have a year? And he laughed at me. And I thought, that's a legitimate question. That's kind of rude. And I said, wait a minute, how long has it been now? Was it 10 years ago? Was it? I don't know. It's been at least 11 years? We don't remember how long it's been. So it was, they have decades between officer-involved shootings, but very frequently, I mean, it's not every day all the time, but that they will produce the sidearm in the face of a threat or potential threat without ever firing a shot. That doesn't answer anything from a legal standpoint, but just to give some frame of reference.
Let me give you two things that are my own personal views. These aren't in my book, but here's the reality. There's so many laws, and everything is so factually sensitive. My belief is you can retreat or take a beating that doesn't seriously impair your life. You should take it, and you should assume everywhere you're carrying a gun or have it has something you're doing that's illegal. Because Senator Toms was here when I was at the conference committee talking about Senate Bill 292, and I'm like, if you want to fix it, this is what you do. If you don't want to fix it, it's going to get torpedoed. But the challenge I had to every legislature, and I think probably Senator Toms and Margie were the only two that got the point, was there's not a single person, including everybody in that room, including me, that can crisscross the state. And before Senate Bill 292 existed, no one could crisscross the state and follow all the laws and ordinances that existed. And that concept was lost. But the federal U.S. code is 10,000 pages. It all comes down to attempts to legislate common sense, and anything outside of that boundary is going to cause you problem. And so if you can't be there, you can retreat, you can avoid it, or you can take a beating or take a lot of grief. You ought to take it. You ought to assume what you're doing with the gun is illegal, because that's the only safe operating framework that there is. And that's not fair or right, but that's the sad reality of the way it is. So take that for what it's worth. That's my own personal view, but it can be refreshing when you realize you're in control in some respects of your choices or not. And no matter how much time and effort you put into it, you're going to come down to the same analysis, which is disengage and not be there if you can avoid it. And if you can't avoid it, you're going to have the 80% rule that's going to back you up, which is the 80% rule is 80% of the people would think what you did was right. But it's maddening to think about. The best thing you can possibly do is watch the events of the evening news when there's been a shooting, or when you're in a place, think about, what would I do here? That's sort of consistent with the training we're talking about. There's all kinds of training. There's physical gun handling training. There's also the mental exercise to go through the shoot, don't shoot scenario, and thinking about it ahead of time and understanding just how rough it's going to be for you if you're involved in that situation should make you want to disengage if you can.
I like the confusion. That's how I see the same hands, or stay up here and clean the razors. Yes, sir.
Okay, so earlier you guys said, if someone's trying to take something from you, can you afford to give it to them? And there's a how should I say this? The belief that it's mine. I'm going to do what I'm doing because it's right. I'm not going to succumb to you just because you're trying to overpower me. And I read somewhere, because people will say, you don't want to escalate the situation. Just give them your wallet, give them your keys, what have you. But I read somewhere that people who resist, and the more force they resist with, the higher their chances of coming out unscathed. And I didn't know if you guys had opinions on that, or if you want to talk anything about that. If someone comes up to me and says, give me your wallet, and I point my gun at him and say no, is that wrong? Because I feel like that's appropriate. If I'm fearing for my life, I'm not going to submit to someone because I don't have to. Does that make sense? Am I just babbling?
Did you hear that back? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the answer to the question, and anybody else can jump in here, is basically what's right and what's wrong. Don't confuse and equate that with law. Law is the default. It's like religion or any other institution you go to for help. That's the default when you can't figure it out yourself. So I wouldn't equate right and wrong necessarily with law, because that doesn't always work out that way. Nice guys sometimes finish last. The other point, I think you're talking about a force continuum where there's a certain point in time, whoever's the willing to go the furthest. So you got somebody that's wanting to take your wallet and you're willing to stand up. The question is, if you're gambling in that, you're going all or none, and the other person might say, you know, that guy, he's a little guy, but maybe he's special, maybe he knows martial arts and he is going to meet me up and he disengages. But unless you're willing to go all or none, and that's a risky proposition, I wouldn't do it. And that's why, and I use this example long before 9/11, that's why terrorists are so successful. When you're willing to give everything to get an objective, you're the most dangerous person that there is. So I would not take that approach personally.
Yes, sir.
At least a couple of you mentioned, calling an attorney as early as possible, or even at the scene. I've heard other people recommend trying to build some kind of relationship with an attorney before you ever get there, or have one on retainer, or something like that. What are your recommendations in regard to that, as far as how to do that, or what the best methods are there, or just having a business card good enough, or go talk to them, or have one on retainer, or none of the above, or all the above, or it's just different things that you hear people say?
I hear those things all the time. The question is, should you have an attorney on a retainer? Probably the people in this room are never going to pull a gun and ever be in a deadly force situation, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't want to flesh out some of the thorny sides of it. You're probably never going to need it. When people call me and say, I've heard about you from X, Y, or Z, should I retain you? I'm like, no, you're the last person that needs me. All you got to do is remember one thing, and that is be quiet until such time as you get yourself an attorney. Life's messy. You'll probably never need it. Educate yourself. Be well trained in when and if you need me. Don't say anything until then. Having an attorney on a retainer, I think, probably doesn't get you anywhere. It just, the probabilities by virtue of you being here are pretty insignificant that you're going to be involved in a deadly force encounter. At least that's my belief. You in particular, if you're training 300 hours a year.
Not a year, just overall.
Overall.
That would be, I would like to.
So would I.
Monetary, upper end, what it costs.
The point, though, is keep quiet until you need an attorney. Then secondly, when you get around to finding one, recognize there's a difference, and don't go find the first thing you find in the phone book or wherever you're looking. Make a research intelligent choice. It's like law. How do you know you've researched something well enough? You keep finding the same names over and over again. That's how you know you've narrowed your list down. Or call one of us, and if we can't help you, I'm sure we can steer you to someone who can.
I've got a related question. It's kind of, I'll piggyback on that. Have you ever heard of the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network? It's like insurance type of thing. They also provide, I guess, expert testimony and things like that. Is it worthwhile? Have you ever seen this organization in action?
I know Marty Hayes. I teach typically every year when Masad Ayub is at Rochester teaching LFI. Now it's MAG. It's Masad Ayub Group. I teach the legal aspects of Indiana law on deadly force. Typically, I do that, and sometimes for John Farnham's course as well when it's running. And as a result of that, Marty Hayes, I've run into him. He's an attorney in Washington State that set that up. He's a nice guy. He does a lot of lots of educational stuff. Sends out lots of useful materials, and the concept basically is an insurance. It's if you're a member, they're building up a defense fund to ultimately defend a member in the right circumstance. I don't know what that is. There's probably no harm in it. He's a squared away guy. It's just any one given deadly force case could cost an enormous amount of money depending upon some of the dynamics. You might need an expert that's a ballistician. You might need an engineer if it's a mechanical failure. There's certainly no harm in doing that, and the materials alone are worth the value of it. He's the only person I know that's doing that, but he's doing it all across the country. But he's a smart guy, and he's also an attorney. I don't know if I answered that question or not.
I just want to know if you thought it was a worthwhile
anything you get into an organization?
It's like insurance, any insurance. Generally, it's not insurance, but you never know if they're worth anything until you have a claim. Hopefully that's policy you never need.
Yes, sir.
Bob, may I follow up on that?
Oh,
just a
okay,
second?
sir.
Understand this, folks. Statistically, of this entire group, you got 80 people, you are more likely to need an attorney because you got popped for drunk driving than for pulling your handgun and discharging it somewhere. So in that regard, you're probably better served to develop a relationship with an attorney that you know you can call to help you at any point, not just in the particular situation that we're talking about now. But the chances, as Brian said, the chances of you needing one of us because you've been involved in a self-defense situation, a deadly force situation, hopefully are minimal or nominal. Needing us for some other reason, probably higher.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. Similar to clarification, because they went over less than lethal defense, but when they got rid of all the laws with handguns and made a generic law without all that, do they still face the city, county, state on things like pepper spray, tasers, impact tools, bladed weapons, things like that? Because it's kind of a shame to have a cop look at you and say, you shouldn't have hit him with that, you should have shot him. When you're trying to go less lethal, because it's, a felony to have that in that particular area of the state or something like that. Do they have like a blanket policy for less than lethal devices in the state as well?
Senate Bill 292, as it played out, and I'll let Senator Tom speak to that more specifically, it preempts local government from more than just making regulations as it relates to firearms. It talks about firearm accessories and a pretty broad spectrum of sporting equipment related to that. The reality of it is, though, it's home state, it's home rule, meaning local areas versus the state government. It's been going on for all of history, and if a local government chooses not to enforce it or follow what Senate Bill 292 says, unless and until they're sued, they're going to do what they want to do, or until someone gets a federal injunction against them. So that's a tough question. Do you have any thoughts on that, Senator Thomas?
Well, I know on Senate Bill 292, once it became law, I was amazed how quickly Indianapolis brought all of their laws into compliance with 292. And most cities across the state did quickly change their laws, what they had on the books. They took them off. They understood that they had to come in compliance. There's been a few holdouts, and I think there's some litigation against some of those cities that they're challenging it. They're not so much into courts, but they have been sued because one town wasn't willing to take off their old laws off the books and get rid of them. They said they wasn't going to enforce them. They just didn't want to get rid of them. And I didn't quite understand. If you got something that's obsolete, you're never going to use it. Why would you keep it there on the books? Why would you take up the room with it? But that's a decision I guess they want to make. It would just come down if they did impose a law in violation of Senate Bill 292, then that law was very specific on the results. That law had teeth to it. The fact that if you've been damaged in any way as a result of a public subdivision violating Senate Bill 292, you have ability to seek damages and also treble damages. You can get triple the pay for legal costs involved in that. So it had some teeth to it, so that if a city or a town did violate Senate Bill 292, they would answer up for it. That was the intent, that we want to make sure that it wasn't just a law. That we do have some laws that have absolutely, there's nothing that really can force the hand on this law being used. But 292 was an exception on that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
well, maybe I'm not grasping because now I understand as far as firearms, but again, we go into less lethal devices, and I've noticed that a lot of places, if you can look at catalogs, it'll tell you that it can't be sold in Indiana, but something else can that's actually more lethal. Because you have these different non-lethal devices. Every day they come up with them impact tools that look like wrenches, so that it doesn't leave an outer stigma that you're actually carrying a less lethal weapon in a crowd of people that can be look like something else, things like that, flashlights, like the paint compliance side of the flashlight, usually on police, law enforcement. How does that work? Because it's, like I said, it's a shame if you're not really sure, where can we find that? Because it's a shame to have a cop saying, well, it was, you're going to jail for hitting him with this, you should have shot him.
Let me answer that question maybe in a way that will be meaningful. First off, even before Senate Bill 292, even before it was passed, we're still talking about ordinance violations. All penal laws are made by the state. So while a municipality could, or a branch of local government or a political subdivision could use their police to civilly confiscate something or escort you off their property, they still couldn't criminally charge you for that because an ordinance violation inherently isn't a penal act. Only the state can make penal decisions. As far as, and I don't know that I can answer on all the less than lethal force, whether it's encompassed within the breadth of 292 or not, but I will say this. I always wondered how when you read a magazine you see, when you know it's allowed, we will not ship high-capacity magazines to South Bend, Indiana. So one day when I was really just out of my mind and obsessive about figuring that out, I figured out how that occurs. An ordinance, whether it's facially valid or not, or facially invalid, if a branch of local government puts it in the Federal Register, like this South Bend magazine ban, it ultimately then, ATF picks it up, puts it in their statutory state and local ordinances, and an FFL dealer, who probably is the one selling those, cannot violate as a term of having an FFL, a local ordinance, even if it's invalid, which is screwball logic. But that's how those wound up in the magazine, because I decided I wanted to answer that question for myself one day.
Okay, so like I said, taking the less legal thing, we carry a small mask at a time. They have some of them now that one of them's about 6 inches long, some you carry in the purse. You pop that out and slap somebody's side the cheeks instead of opting to shoot them, and that solves the problem. There have been cases in Las Vegas where a guy used an baton instead of a gun. He got arrested. It's like, and that was the thing. The guy came on and he said, "Well, yeah, but this is illegal, and you should have shot him." So here you've opted for the less lethal response. And now you're going to do a year in jail because you didn't shoot him, you could have walked away with your hand.
And you could argue that an ASP, because if you're trained on an ASP, but I don't claim to be a police officer, but there's red zones, there are other zones that are considered death strikes or not. But in Indiana, local government, they may have an ordinance, but as far as less than lethal items, the only things that in the Indiana code that exist right now would be Chinese throwing stars are illegal, switchblade knives are illegal. I'm trying to think if there's any other one. There's nothing in there about blackjacks or slaps.
Which is very dangerous in themselves. You can crack a skull.
But you still could get charged criminally by using anything if it's equated to a weapon that could inflict serious bodily injury or death.
I did, by the way, introduce a bill this past session to repeal the switchblade knife ban in Indiana, because that's one law that nobody has been able to tell me why it makes sense. Nobody understands why we have that law. It probably served us back in the 50s, the days of the movies of Rebel with a Cause or something like that. But today's knives that are available, the thumb-operated knives, and this is what this is what I spoke to. Yeah, I mean, those knives, you can get as proficient with them. Actually, you can open those faster if you work with it, and it don't take long. You can open it faster than you can with an automatic knife because the action, as opposed to pressing a button, which will release the mechanism and let the blade come out. And then you go one step farther, you can have a sheath knife on your hip. When you pull it out, it's already there, the blade's already there. And it just doesn't make sense why we have that. It's one of those laws that probably at the time it made, it felt good. But I mean, I can go walk down the sidewalk with my steel chainsaw with a 2-foot bar on it, running. And I'm not breaking the law.
You're a hockey mask.
Yeah. In fact, I've talked to people before about this. The people who are all against guns and tell us how bad guns are. I said, I tell you what, I'll give you think guns are so dangerous, I'll give you a loaded gun, and you can even have it chambered, and you let me have a chainsaw running. and we'll step on an elevator and see who walks out. It's just, you know, it's things, we don't use common sense anymore. Nobody uses logic. It's often, it just feels good. It's a knee-jerk reaction. So that bill, it did pass through the Senate on something like 49-1. I think there was one senator voted against it. The Democrats was on board with that one, but they thought I was going to give up guns for knives, but the House side, the chairman wouldn't hear it, and so I'm going to reintroduce the bill again this next session because it was a well-written bill. It was very, very well-written, very specific. It wasn't the throwing knives. It wasn't going to allow for a knife that discharges a blade. It was just simply the automatic knives because there are people in emergency response people would like to have a knife like that. People are handicapped, maybe are limited to the use of one hand, or maybe people that are limited in the use of both hands that would like to have a knife, a pocket knife that they can use, but they can't open a blade. That's possible. In fact, I think in doing my background research, most crimes concerning knives are usually kitchen knives. It's not the knives that we're talking about. So. But it's one of these, and that bill, I guarantee you, that bill got all kind of news attention. You know, and the way the media does, it's like, well, what kind of lunatic is wanting to repeal the? Well, how many drive-by knifings have you read about?
Yes, I do too.
What about if an employer has a rule that you can't carry a gun on their property? Can you keep it in your vehicle, and can they still discharge you for that?
No. Having a gun on the workplace?
Yeah.
He's asking about the law, the carry to the workplace legislation, carry to the workplace.
Okay.
That was introduced in year before last, I think. Senator Nugent had that bill, and it allows a person to bring a firearm to the workplace as long as it's in the vehicle locked up. And what happened was we had to make another adjustment to that bill this past session because some employers were trying to get around this. It just rubbed them raw that somebody's going to have a gun in their vehicle on the workplace. So what they were doing was requiring some employees to fill out paperwork that they had guns or that they own guns or that they had a gun in the car. They were just making them fill out the paperwork. Or either they were making them park their cars in a designated spot in the parking lot. So if he was going to rob a car with a gun in, you figure this is the cars that you would do that. And so we changed that to where it prohibits them from doing that sort of thing. And but the threat never goes away. There's always somebody pushing on. I'll tell you what happened. Just this past session, my brother, who works for a company there in Evansville, the employer, out of the blue, decided that they were going to require their employees to, on a questionnaire that they were given, it was like a 60-question questionnaire. One of the questions was, do you own guns and do you have guns in your car? And that you would agree not to have the gun in your car on company property. Complete violation of the law. And they was threatening their employees. Now, a lot of these guys right away caved in and signed that document. My brother called me and I said, well, you do what you want, but I wouldn't sign it. And so he held out. There was about a half dozen of them, of a workforce of 100 people that would not sign it. And I had a friend of mine who's an attorney send him a letter just to make him, remind him about that. And then their corporate office wrote back and said that they have no intention of violating any state law and that they was going to get it corrected, and I think they did. But there's always that push that we're always going to be up against. And but no, you can have your firearm with you in a vehicle on company property. And the purpose was behind this was you're telling your employees that you really don't care nothing about them when they're in transit to and from work. I mean, an employer that would prohibit a person from having their firearm in their vehicle, to me, is saying, I don't care if your car runs out of gas and you're pulled off on the side of the road and a van pulls up with 4 big burly guys get out and whip your butt. I don't care about that. I just don't want you having your gun in your car on my property, whether I'd ever know it or not. That's what it said to me. This is the way I take things. Does
that include the railroads?
There was some exemptions in that bill. When that bill was introduced, they excluded out refineries, certain areas. There was I think a category of 19 different, maybe even longer list than that, of specific industries that was exempt from this, and probably railroads. Some of those were exempted out.
Who hasn't had a question? Sir.
How does that apply to motorcycles?
Well, it's your vehicle. I mean, there are a few places you can hide a firearm.
Well, I've got lockable luggage, so what I've been doing is I pocket carry a smaller pistol on the days I'm at work.
Yeah.
And in the holster, then in the parking lot, I remove it from my pocket, throw it in the trunk, and lock it.
Yeah.
But there is a point that the gun is exposed. Not that anyone ever pays attention to what's going on around them.
Well, it's if I recall, the law doesn't say anything about being exposed, but I don't know whether I'd want to do that because I certainly wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to have my gun laying in the front seat and claiming, well, this is what I get back to. You could say, well, look, you don't say it has to be concealed; it just has to be locked up.
It does have to be concealed.
I didn't think it said the word concealed was in the bill. It may have. I don't recall. It just had to be locked up and secure or something like that. I can't recall it saying concealed. It may have been. But I wouldn't want my gun visible for anybody to see it. I mean, that'd be my own personal view.
I think your concern was more, you got off the bike and now you take the gun out and stick it in the
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a period. It's
a few seconds.
It's a second or two that it's neither concealed nor in my vehicle because my vehicle doesn't have an inside.
Well, I don't recall the language concealed being in that bill, but it may have. Is it?
So you're more concerned about from the time you get off the
Yeah,
bike to the
being
time
seen.
you close the lid on
Right.
the luggage compartment.
I don't know whether that would be a violation. The violation would be is if you went inside the facility because that's the limit. That you can't take it inside your work facility, or if you drive a vehicle for that company, you can't have it in that vehicle.
I'll throw out a thought. If you're concerned about it, or if it would be a problem, is stop at the local stop and rob before you get there, and stick it in the luggage, and then go around the corner to where you work or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be a good idea. Yeah.
Some other, yes, sir.
Kind of an extension on the workplace. Obviously, it's a big hot button issue in the schools. Is there anything underway legislatively addressing the rights of students to carry on public university properties?
We tried that. Johnny Nugent tried that bill some years ago. It failed by one vote in the Senate. He's talking about carrying on campus in state colleges and things like that. And I think Senator Banks was going to introduce a bill this, maybe it was last year, but it didn't get anywhere. The problem is, on carrying on campus, brother, I tell you, you talk about poking at the bees on that one. Man. Here's what we're at, folks. Gun owners, it's been my experience, and this is not on anybody in here because you guys are not your average bears. You're here today. But gun owners by nature have no ambition to really get involved in things like this here or do anything to defend their gun rights. They just talk about it. That's my experience. I've seen this over and over again. The other side, the people, the opponents of gun ownership, they're active. I got it. My hat's off to them. Liberals, you got to credit where credit's due. They will work at it. They will stop in the middle of their kid's birthday party and come to the call. Our people won't get up away from Dancing with the Stars. I'm just being honest with you. I tell you what, for years and years, when we started our group, we would go to the gun show, and a local gun show promoter would let us have a table to recruit either membership for the NRA, or if we had some kind of petition drive going, he would let us have a table so we could do that. Now, over the course of 7 years, I would see these guys come in there, and we'd try to get them to either join the NRA or or sign up on a petition. Carry on campus was one of them. No, I'm not interested. I'm not doing none of that stuff. And I heard it over and over again. One occasion, It was about 3 great big burly guys, pretty husky guys. And we was asking them to sign up, or the petition, I think it was the petition drive. No, not going to do none of that. But I'll tell you right now, for my cold dead hands, that's why I stopped them. I said, ho. I've had it to here. You're telling me from your cold dead hands, you're going to fight back. I said, when's the last time you've wrapped your hands around an ink pen or a telephone and told a legislator, wrote to them about what you're telling me right now? And they just looked at me like I had horns in my head. I said, never had. But you want me to believe at 3 in the morning, if the Gestapos kick your door in, you're going to fire back. You're going to shoot back, are you? No, you won't. You'll hand those guns over in a heartbeat. And you know why? Because your wife will tell you. You're not losing our house and going to jail and losing your job with these guns. You'll give them up. And probably give them up for your neighbor, too. Because you won't do things like we're just simply talking about here, which is a lot less dangerous. And that is to try to preserve what somebody else fought long and hard years ago for us to have. That we've inherited just by virtue of being born in this country. All I'm asking is for folks to just take a little ambition, to be involved, look at the people you're voting for, see what they're about when it comes to gun rights. And when something's going on that's favorable for us, call your particular legislator to tell them to support that, to come on board with it. If it's something toxic, something radioactive we don't want, by the same token, call or write to them, tell them, look, I fight this thing, I don't want this to pass. A simple postcard. I'm not asking people to write novels. A simple postcard in your own handwriting, with your own thought, but not no assembly line postcard. It doesn't take much initiative to sign your name onto it. A card from you with your own words in your own handwriting, either for or against a measure that you are interested in. That has more impact than anything else you can imagine that you can do. And it's a lot easier than having this Hollywood scenario in your mind that, well, when they come in, I'm going to be blazing away and I'm going to take them all out. It's not going to happen. It won't happen. But this is the message I would really like to impose on everybody here. These are the things we can do. And we can get our friends to do it, our family members to do it, co-workers to do it. That's really important. That's where our work's at. And I do believe, too, our battle is at the state and local levels. The federal government, I don't want to talk bad about the federal government, but quite frankly, I don't believe most of them people can find their own food dish. And I don't want them telling me how to live. At the state and local levels, you have the connection. You can meet these guys. You can catch up with the legislator at the state and local level. You can catch them at the Walmart, or at the rifle range, or on the street at the ball game. I akin federal guys sort of like Bigfoot. I've heard they existed. I've heard there's been reported sightings. But can you get in touch with one of them? Chances are you can't. But state and local, that's where our battleground's at. That's where we set up our defense. And I think, as you guys have seen, it's become more and more about state sovereignty and states' rights. We hear this a lot in the news lately. It's on the minds of people right now. It's on their lips about this. At some point, we may have to draw a line. We may have to tell the federal government, you know what? You keep your money for our road funding in schools. We'll get along. We'll just pothole our roads. But we're going to make our own decisions. It might come to that. I don't know. But looking at this federal government we have now and contrast it back to what we had in the 1700s, we don't have Patrick Henrys no more. We don't have Sam Adams and George Masons. We just don't have those kind of folks anymore. If we do, they're surely not running for office. And so I'm just saying, be realistic. What's important to you? Gun rights are important. It was important enough that some of the founding fathers wouldn't want to sign the Constitution without it. It meant enough to them. I'd just give anything if I could have heard what they had to say about a Second Amendment. I doubt whether it's debated as hotly as it is today. But it was important enough to put it second in the lineup of our 10 Bill of Rights. And I do want to say how nice it is to see a room full of folks here that take an interest, men and women both, that are interested enough to learn about what that Second Amendment is about. And these guys here today has given us a lot of knowledge and aspects on what we need to hear and what we need to learn about. And as far as my message, I hope that I can inspire people to understand that, you know, it's in the power of all of you to do the things that we've been doing with our little group down there in Evansville. And here might be your next state senator, our House representative. Could be a federal legislator come out of this group. hope that wasn't a slam on nobody. But I'm just telling you, it's all the power's in your hands. Reach out and make it happen. And these are fights worth fighting. And it's much more realistic than it is with these Hollywood images that you're going to be out in the woods and you're going to shoot them down and the Black Hawks and you're going to knock them out of the sky and all that. This is the real war, and this is where you can really make the changes take place. And it's all in your capabilities to do that. Like I said before, I don't come from deep pockets. We're just common, ordinary people, working men. That's all I've ever done in my life. I never in my imagination would have dreamed I would be a state senator. Never dreamed it in my life. But things happen for a reason. And I will say this to you too. I'll wrap up. I will say this to you. And I say this to everywhere I go. And I'm not ashamed to tell you this. Somebody asks, well, what's it got to do with guns? I'm telling you right now, we need to pray for our nation.
Yes, sir.
I'm telling you folks, we are in it way over our heads. And we can fight the battles, and I don't mind trying to stomp out fires, but I know God's hand on what we're trying to do. The Founding Fathers understood this concept. There's no real hope of success. It don't take much to look around and see your daily paper and daily news of the things that we're dealing with, the topics of conversation that we're discussing, that our kids are hearing about. Beyond our wildest imagination, 50 years ago, I would have never believed we would be engaged in some of the things we're talking about now. So I do ask you to pray for our country, pray for our leadership, and ask that God puts his hand back on this nation. The Founding Fathers fought a war against all odds and succeeded. We can too, if we go to the source where our power would come from. If it sounds like I'm making a preaching ceremony out of this, I'm not. I'm just telling you, I understand where I'm at in the battlefield. I know my limitations. And I know what we can gain, how we can achieve it, or how we can lose it. It's our choice. So, for what it's worth, I had to share that with you. I'm done.
Hey, my hat's been around. I don't know how anybody can follow that act.
I get that question.
Were there... Okay, burning question? Yes.
Well, if we got time.
No, we got time. I was just going to ask them if they had something they wanted to bring up.
Oh, well, I want to go back to the school thing for a second. Can we talk about the definition of a school? Is it actually illegal to carry on campus? Is campus a school?
Property or school function?
That kind of thing?
Let me, before I do that, since Senator Toms has got us on this roll about federal versus state power, there is a huge rift between, I'm going to take my tie off of now. There's a huge rift between state sovereignty and the federal government. And while I kind of would agree it's so big it's hard to change, everyone in this room should watch and follow what the Supreme Court is going to do, probably like McDonald and the Hellier cases on a 5-4 split, what they're going to do with this health care bill. That's the most significant case probably that will be decided in our lifetime, which is what are the limits of the federal government under the Commerce Clause, if any, because it directly relates to guns. And essentially, if anything touches going across state lines, Congress has taken the position they can regulate it, and that includes the health care bill. And the Supreme Court does not strike down provisions of the health care bill that aren't interstate commerce. The Commerce Clause will swallow state sovereignty, and it's not much of a removed risk that guns or things otherwise will be pulled into. Congress can do anything under the Commerce Clause. So whether you agree with that or don't agree with it, make sure you understand what we're really talking about with this health care reform bill that's up before the U.S. Supreme Court, because it will profoundly affect everybody in this room. Whether you have health care or don't have health care, it's whether the federal government can do anything over and above the state government, and there's no limitation to it. At least that's the way I read it as a lawyer.
I was just going to follow up a little bit on what he asked. I'm a third-year student at IPFW, and as far as I know, anybody in here, as long as you're not a student, you can go on that campus packing whatever you're carrying and face no repercussions, and they'll just tell you to leave. It's a private institution, so there's no actual law against it that I'm aware of. Now, if you're a student, that's when you can be expelled, disciplined, penalized, whatever you want to do. And but there's no rule against less than lethal options like tasers, pepper spray, chemical. You can have all that. I carry spray in my backpack, and I've talked to the campus police. They say no problem.
Well, on the carry on campus, we're referring to colleges and universities in Indiana, not primary schools like high schools. That's federal law covers that. But on that, like I said, it was tried. It didn't get anywhere, and it's such a thorny issue with society because so many people are just shocked at the thought that some kid that has a license to carry would have his gun with him on college campuses. You can have your gun there as long as nobody knows. It's not a big deal. If they do, they ask you to leave with it. It's one of those things, again, like we talked about going into a restaurant. They tell you to leave with it, you got to leave with it. But, when I was talking about Senate Bill 292 before the Senate, I walked them through what happened at Virginia Tech. And this is what the public doesn't really think about this. They don't process the thought from A to Z. I spoke to an audience at Jasper, Indiana, at the Vincennes University campus. I was invited to speak there about carry on campus. And my opponent that was talking against me was a police officer from Jasper. And so we got there that morning, and he said that, he told me, Jim, I could just as easily be on your side of the argument, but I was all they could get today, so I'm arguing the other side. And he did a good job. And I was looking forward to it. Everybody was saying, Jim, don't go, it's an ambush, don't go in there. I said, well, if we don't get outside our own circles and talk about what it is we know with those who only know what they see on the news, we're never going to gain ground. So we went into this auditorium. It was a lecture hall. It had seating of 90 people. This thing was advertised in the paper. And I was looking forward to it. And we got there. Probably wasn't 20 people in that room. And he went first, and he spoke. And then they broke for dinner, and they had a nice chicken dinner. It was worth just going for the dinner. Chicken. And it was open to the public and stuff. And I was so disappointed. It was 20 people at best, and we brought, I think there was about 6 or so went with us just to watch what was going to take place. Well, anyway, after lunch, we went back in, and the doors opened up, and that place filled up. I mean, them professors, they brought all their students in. In fact, I was sitting, I had to get my seat up. I told the lady, I said, hey, I'm the one speaking. You have my chair. It was packed out, standing room only. You asked Margie. And I thought, oh, right, And the questions that this kids was asking me were legitimate, bona fide questions. And I talked about the Virginia Tech thing. And I talked to him. I said, let me just walk you through what happened. I said, and this guy's name, I may not have it right, Ching-Wan Cho, whatever his name was, Soon-Young Cho, he had 9 minutes. I said, this guy closed the door. I said, I want to put you in that room for a minute. He closed the door, he locked. For 9 minutes, he shot over 174 rounds, something like that. Now, I said, if you've ever been at a shooting range, you'll see people wearing hearing protections because the muzzle blast is extraordinarily loud. And now you're in a room where this guy is killing people. They're screaming, they're hollering. They know that they are on the doorway of eternity. They're not going home tonight. They're never going to see mom and dad again. No more Christmases, no more birthday parties, not going home to their pet. This is the final moment. And this guy's cooking off 1 round every 3 seconds. And the police are still trying to find out where it's all taking place at. Now, let's say he's shooting victim number 24 in the lineup of the 37 or 32. And you're number 23. Let's freeze frame it for just a moment. Now would you be willing to have somebody else on campus, somebody else in that room with a gun besides the shooter? Would you? Make up your mind because we're going to start the clock and you're up next. You could have heard a pin drop in there. And I know they never thought about that. They only think about this guy's shooting, how terrible was this guy had a gun. But they don't understand what we are all talking about, that you have the ability to protect yourself. You never know when a circumstances come like that. And I guarantee you at that critical moment, you're not really concerned as much about the legalities of it as you are about being able to see the sunrise tomorrow morning. And the questions that they asked me, these students was asking, one asked, said, well, could we have, why do we have to have guns? We have security officers and cameras. I said, all right, you're leaving school, you're on your way home, your car quits running on you, you pull over on the side of the road, some troublemakers pulls up behind you. Now where are your security cameras and security guards now? You don't have your gun here. And one lady, one girl, she said, well, couldn't we have rubber bullets? I said, well, let's run it this way. You're walking across the parking lot late at night, last class. You're by yourself. It's a lonely parking lot. As you're approaching your car, you see a shadow coming at you in a menacing pace. In the glint of the street light, you see he's got a gun. You want the one with rubber bullets. All I'm trying to bring into perspective is it's a terrible world we're living in. And these guys are giving us very good information. But this is the world we're in. This is the reality of things. And and one guy there, I think he might have been the professors was really, they were sideways with the world with me. It was my day. I was batting them out. Every question I got was a genuine question. I was knocking them out of the ballpark. I was really on. But this one teacher, she asked me, she said, well, have you ever been shot at yourself? I said, yes, they called it Vietnam. That was the last question. One guy asked, he said, well, my kid goes to a college where the dorm has got drugs and alcohol. Now you're proposing that they have guns as well. I said, sir, you've just admitted, everybody in this room, you know that your kid's at a school where there's drugs and alcohol. And apparently you had no problem with that. If that's my kid, he'd be out of school so fast it would make his head swim. I said, drugs and alcohol affect the mind physically, has a physical effect on the mind. The handgun is an inanimate object. It doesn't. But you see what we're up against. You see the emotion and the feel good and how that works. And that's a tough weapon that we're up against, because we're using logic and reason, prudence, and it's difficult. And I know when these guys are talking some of the cases, emotion is a major factor, isn't it? I mean, that's a tool that everybody uses. And so I only look at it from a very pragmatic standpoint, and that's why I'm working to see to it that I've been trying to work on repealing some of the gun laws we have that I've seen were offensive to legitimate citizens, and if we can continue to build on good measures that strengthens our ability to exercise our constitutional right, I'm going to continue to do it. I got 2 more years in the state senate. If I run for re-election, we'll see once. But it's worth the fight, and it's a fight that you guys, every one of you, can make too. And we rely on you, because it's you that are the employer. We're the employees as legislators. You're the employer. It's you who call. And it's your job. It's your obligation, responsibility to take an active role in this. And you know, if somebody's got something going on like this meeting today, and well, it's dinner date, you know what? Maybe you ought to pass up on the dinner date just once and attend something like this here was put together with all the folks that worked on this thing, and do what you guys are doing. You need to tell that to your friends and your coworkers, people you know. You did take the time to spend a whole nice, beautiful Saturday here to listen to lawyers and legislators talk. But it's because you're wanting to do something. And you need to inspire other people to do what you guys are doing. That you got to do. So I did say a while ago I was quitting. I am done. We got to go. We got to go.
I got 2 of these with an O in the middle. Wow. So, but yeah, and taken to the federal level, and you know, and if you don't vote in November, I don't want to hear it. The country could survive 4 more years, but I don't know if it could survive 2 or 3 more Supreme Court justices. So, yes, sir.
This is directed to Senator Toms. I know you said you're done, but
that's all right. He's done for now. You
guys can hold me down on the range. He is done now.
As a state senator, what do you see as the possibility of Indiana adopting laws that would allow a license holder to carry on school property, similar to like what Utah does?
You know, I'm thinking of the makeup we have right now, and just based on the makeup right now before the November elections. Carry on campus, I'm just being as honest as I can, as bad as we need it, because I think young men and women that want to make sure they feel comfortable that if something happened, they would be able to get back home to mom and dad again. The chance of getting it passed is just very slim right now, and I say that because of we have just enough legislators who would fight that. The media would just really turn the screws in on that one. I mean, they would wear anybody out. It would take a brave soul to really push on that right now. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing it, but it's just the fact that I believe that we just don't have enough strong people that would support it and be willing to fight with the way the media would run you through the chipper on this one, because they would. And I just don't know. I mean, every time I read about an incident that takes place on a college campus, I just think, let me ask you this, and this is what I talk about. How many times, when's the last time you heard on the news or seen in the paper of a shooting, a mugging, a rape, a robbery taking place at a gun show?
Shootings, yes.
Shooting. Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying? You get my point? I mean, I think if a bank had a sign on their door that their tellers are qualified shooters and armed, a bank robber would probably move on down to the next credit union or something. It just probably wouldn't. I'm just saying that, it's just unfortunate that we don't have on a school campus like that people's ability to at least have the firearms with them, even if it's in their car. It'd be a tough fight. It just would. And after this next election, I'm not sure what the makeup's going to be. I don't know who's going to take control of the House. I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know. Again, it goes back to just what Bob said. You got to vote, and you got to vote for the right kind of people. You do. And when these guys are running for office and they hold a town hall meeting, my golly, go to them. Go to those town hall meetings and ask them direct questions. Ask them a question that only needs a yes or no answer. And they start drifting off. So wait a minute. That was just simply yes or no. That's what I did to Alan Combs on his radio show. That's why he said, thanks for hosting the show. I mean, Alan, is that your statement? Is that your position? But find out who it is that's running for office. And if they're good people, help them. Call them. Ask them, can I do some door-to-door with you? Do something for these guys. My hat's off to anybody who's running for office, and I don't care whether they're Democrat, Republican, or Independent, whatever. Somebody's willing to step out and put everything about themselves out there for everybody to look at. My hat's off to them. That's, so that's important to do. I don't know. Like I said, right now, I don't think we can do it.
Is for the quiet ones here.
I'm just waiting for the Bible to come out.
Is there anything on the list or mind or things that are going through your minds that are popping up that you wanted to bring up? Oh, let's not always see the same hands.
I talked them into submission. I think
Bob, I
think we are going to fill because we.
That's all right.
It's okay.
Oh yeah.
Had a great time here, folks. I really.
I had no idea. I've talked to Jim a couple of times on the phone and a few emails, but this was outstanding. Yeah.
You guys are great people.
Can you say?
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
Can I get you to sign that?
Oh, sure. You gotta watch this. I wrote a bad check one time.
You got a 3-day drive back.
Before or after Calvin?
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
Questions for the two legal beagles here?
Sort of modern
guys-
Abe Lincoln.
You don't have to
I mean, thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Is there any way to